Last week, a House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee held a hearing on the Bush administration's practice of extraordinary rendition, whereby hundreds of terror suspects who had never been indicted for any crimes have been abducted and flown to either secret agency prisons or to foreign countries such as Egypt or Syria, where they are tortured. Throughout the hearing, Representative Dana Rohrabacher, Republican of California, aggressively defended the U.S. rendition program and attacked the witnesses. 3 members of the European Parliament testified that rendition actually hinders prosecutions of terrorists. At one point, Rohrabacher argued that imprisoning and torturing one innocent person was a fair price to pay for locking up 50 terrorists. When the audience groaned, he said this:
"Well, I hope it's your families. I hope it's your families that suffer the consequences."
That earned him Worst Person in the World award from Countdown's Keith Olbermann.
Our winner, California Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, defending at a House hearing U.S. rendition of suspected terrorists. You know, when we kidnap them and take them to another country and torture them. Rohrabacher said that imprisoning and torturing one innocent person was a fair price to pay for locking up 50 terrorists who would, quote, go out and plant a bomb and kill 20,000 people. After groans went up from members of the audience at the hearing, Congressman Rohrabacher said, well, I hope it's your families. I hope it's your families that suffer the consequences. Imprisoning and torturing one innocent person is worth it if you could lock up 50 terrorists. Well, you're innocent, Congressman. You first. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher of California, today's worst person in the world.
Let's find out a little more about Congressman Rohrabacher. In a February 4, 2004 article by Jamie Glazoff entitled Off-Base Congressman, Robert B1 Bob Dornan, the former Republican congressman, said this about Rohrabacher.
I said, Dana, hello, I'm very angry at you. I saw you on Fox News tell Bert Hume that you fought in Afghanistan. Dana, you know that you are a draft dodger. Your own dad told me that you broke his heart because you used an old high school x-ray to beat the draft. How dare you say you fought in Afghanistan?
Was Rohrabacher saying that this was during the Soviet occupation?
That is what I asked him. When was this? When were you at the Reagan White House? And he replied that it was after he was elected to Congress. I couldn't believe my ears because I know the person who took him there on a camping trip of a few days, and he's claiming that he fought there. So I challenged him and said, so, you did the Dan Rather thing and stuck your foot over the border or went in 10 yards. He replied, I fought in Afghanistan and fired and killed Russian soldiers. We were all shocked since this was right in front of Christopher Watcher's mother, Evan, her son Jason, another lady, and my son Mark, who had the audio on our camera and didn't realize it. I said, Dana, you're over the top. This is beyond Walter Mitty. This is pathological lying. And then he challenges me. How many times were you in Vietnam, Bob? I had been there during the war about 8 times, mostly as a journalist. My longest stay was 6 weeks. Upon giving him this information, he told me that he was in Vietnam even longer than I was, trying to trump me on both Afghanistan and Vietnam. Of course, he didn't know that I had been in Afghanistan in '72 and stayed there longer than his short camping trip.
But Mr. Dornan, he's changing the topic. Did he actually kill Russian soldiers?
That's so sick we have to come back to it. But let me tell you what I said to him. Okay, buddy, I'm an Air Force officer. Every one of those trips, even as a journalist, I used my reserve commission to get on combat missions. I flew in 14 combat missions and numerous helicopter missions. And when were you in Vietnam? He told me that he was there in the summer '67, had carried a gun, and was in danger there. I said, you're losing it, Dana. This will not stand. So I started doing research on Dana's travels. I went into his financial disclosures. I see all these trips to Grover Norquist's Islamic Institute. Then I recalled that the late Congressman Jerry Solomon called me at home one night and asked me what was going on with California. Is it in the water, he asked me? When did this Rohrabacher develop into this strange person? I took him on my congressional delegation to Uzbekistan and all these other countries bordering Afghanistan, and I'll never take him anywhere again. He would disappear all night, meeting with nefarious characters, and his wife was drinking beer out of a can, smoking cigars, and wearing pedal pushers in front of Muslim clerics who were already looking at us with hate. This is incredible. This man is a threat. I'll never take him anywhere again. Here's another one I learned this morning. This is since 9/11. He says, when I was in Afghanistan using the affectionate short term the Muj for the Mujahideen, the Muj, the combats I was with, pointed to this encampment and said, you see that encampment? We don't go near that camp. There's a really bad man in there. Guess who this was? It was Osama bin Laden. He then remarks to the audience, that's how close I was to taking him out.
But at that time, bin Laden was not his enemy. They were allies in fighting the Soviets. So why would he be taking out his allies? It just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. This is historical revisionism because in that time Osama bin Laden was not known as a fighter but as a financier. He's totally out of time and place on this one. But here's the most dangerous one of all. He stated that he warned the White House about 9/11. Now this is the ultimate delusion or pathological lie. He said he came back on one of these Islamic terrorist-funded trips and they tipped him off, telling him that they know there's going to be an attack. He calls the White House and demands a meeting with Condoleezza Rice. At this point, it diverges into two stories. One is that they wouldn't take his calls. They have denied that to me in the political affairs section of the White House, saying that it never happened. But the version I'm looking at is that Rohrabacher said that they finally gave him an appointment. When he tells this story, he pauses for dramatic effect and says, 2:00 in the afternoon, September 11th, 2001. I woke up like all of you to our skyscrapers on fire, and my meeting was canceled.
Are there any principles in his political life? What motivates him? What drives him?
You've asked me a very fair question, and I want to be fair. His terrible guilt that only he knows as a son of a Marine fighter pilot hero, deliberately breaking his father's heart by ditching military service, his father called it draft dodging, has motivated him to be a strong anti-communist.
So, what can we conclude from this week's insane remarks and his past performances? He's a draft dodger, like everyone in the Bush administration who thinks wars should be run by the rich and fought by the poor for the benefit of the rich. He's a pathological liar, like everyone in the Bush administration who thinks lying to the American people is acceptable because it's for their own good. Leo Strauss would be proud of him, such a good little German. He thinks that the right to a fair trial only applies to rich white people and torture is an acceptable practice. After all, the enemy hates us for our freedoms. You remember them, the freedoms Rohrabacher wants to take away from us. And by us, I mean those of us who aren't rich and sufficiently white. Over 400 of the 770 persons who have been imprisoned in Guantanamo over the 5 years it has been opened have been released. Only 380 are left imprisoned in Guantanamo. Only 3 have been charged by the military commission, and only 1 tried in Guantanamo. The Bush administration has said it will try only 50 to 70 of the 380 remaining in Guantanamo. This means that of 770 who have been in Guantanamo, only 50 to 70 will be tried. The others eventually will be freed due to the lack of evidence of crime. Many will have spent 5 years or more in imprisonment.